So we're continuing our discussion on the analysis of one quantitative variable. Today we're going to look at the normal distribution and then using that distribution through a rule called the empirical rule. So we've looked at the normal distribution before, but today we're going to highlight some of its characteristics or remind you of some of the characteristics that the normal distribution has. So starting out, just the look of the curve. When you talk about this normal distribution, the area underneath the curve is equated to the probability. So the total area underneath the curve would be 1, or if you're talking about it in terms of probability, the total percentage underneath the curve is going to be 100%. When you look at the curve, you can see that it's perfectly symmetric. It's also bell-shaped and unimodal. So remember that unimodal means that there's only one prominent peak. Similarly to what we saw in the past when we were looking at one categorical variable, here it will be centered at the mean, and because we're talking about quantitative data, the notation for population mean is going to be mu. So the center of the normal distribution is mu, and then when you move out, you can measure the spread with standard deviation, which is denoted with sigma. So what the empirical rule does, just generally, it starts with that white line. So here we have mu being the center, and then it moves out 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations from the mean. And what the empirical rule does is it gives you basically a snapshot of the population you're looking at. So within 1 standard deviation of the mean, so adding 1 standard deviation, which remember is sigma, or subtracting, it gets us to 68% of the observations. If you add and subtract 2 standard deviations, so 1 and then 2 more standard deviations, or excuse me, 1 more standard deviation out to 2, it will put you to 95% of the population, and then going out 3 standard deviations, so adding 1, 2, and then 3, or subtracting 1, 2, and then 3 standard deviations from the mean, you'll contain almost the whole curve, which is 99.7% of the population.